This is the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with your host, Vicki Davis.
Today we're talking with my friend, Tinashe Blanchet. She is with Inova Math as a math specialist and growth leader. And she and I have known each other, I think, for longer than 10 years now. Tinashe is a math expert. So, Tinashe, how do we make math, the deep conceptual stuff, real to kids?
It's all about starting where students are, right? Figuring out what makes them tick, what's important to them, what do they like doing, and then figuring out where is that overlap between what it is that I'm trying to convey to students and the things that they're interested in. Now, of course, I know as a math educator, we have a lot of standards to hit. We have a curriculum that we're bound to use, but that doesn't mean that we can't be creative, right? And I think that that's a piece that a lot of teachers, it kind of gets put on the back burner because we're under so much pressure to think about other things. So when you are dealing with students in math class who are not necessarily excited to learn about fractions or functions, what can I do as a teacher that's going to get them engaged and get them excited?
Love that. Engagement is the best form of classroom management. Wow. Do I quote you like you're the one who said that? I don't think I've ever heard that before.
I'm going to take credit for that. I'm sure I've heard that from somewhere else.
So I have all kinds of respect for math teachers because the subject is so hard. So what are some of the things when you're working with math teachers that you say to help them become teachers who can more engage kids?
Well, that's a big question. I've been doing this conference session in Utah, the Utah Council of Teachers of Mathematics. I've done it at the International Congress on Math Education in Australia this summer about mathematical modeling and building scale models. What I talked about in this session was this activity that is pretty common where they have kids build a scale model. So when I say a scale model, what I mean is like you're taking an object and you're either making it bigger or smaller. Right. So an example of this is like I did it once with my after school math program where the kids just chose like an object. I think one group chose an envelope. Another was a fork, like a plastic fork and knife, and they made it huge. And so this was a great activity for measurement. They had to do a lot of really detailed measurement. I've actually done this also in my IB math studies class with high school students. And one group actually made this huge TI-84 calculator. And this calculator did everything but come on. Like you could press the buttons and everything. It was so cool. And what's interesting about that particular project is that the kid who made the huge calculator was not my best student, not by a long shot. Okay, this is a kid this is the one I always had to like wake up. So imagine my surprise when he walks in with this like ridiculous scale model. And it was in that moment that I realized that this is why it's so important. We can't see projects and activities and engagement as something that we do after we finish all of the real work, right? Which is what a lot of us teachers do. Because that was a student who never really engaged with me when I was doing things in a true way. And it wasn't until I rolled out that project that that light bulb went off for him. And so I wonder how many students are sitting in classrooms kind of flying under the radar, doing the bare minimum because they're not being challenged. They're not being given something that sparks their creativity and their excitement. So to me, that's why it's so important for us as teachers to really think deeply about how can we make math come alive for students? Because as we've talked about, we are in a crisis in terms of math education in this country. Right? Kids are struggling. COVID didn't help. And so we really have to think more about what can we do to kind of rescue our students from the situation that they're in with regards to the teaching and learning of mathematics.
So the building a scale model, I would have loved to have done that as a kid. I struggled in geometry. So what standards does that align with? Which class do you usually teach that in?
Well, it's interesting you should ask me that. It's one of those activities and one of those projects that you can literally adapt to any grade level. So the first time I did it, I actually did it when I was in undergrad. My math education professor did it with us. So I did it in college the first time, okay? And then when I did it with my students, I was a high school math teacher. And then when I did it at my nonprofit, I did it with the elementary and middle school students. Regardless of what grade level you do it at, you're basically hitting your measurement standards, which, fun fact, measurement is usually always the lowest area on standardized tests. Kids don't know how to, they don't even know how to like line up the edge of a ruler to an object when they measure it, because again, that is hands-on. And a lot of times hands-on is what gets kind of overlooked when we're teaching math. So measurement is a big one. Ratio and proportion. Of course, building a scale model is incorporating ratios. And then as you brought up the geometry standards, because you can always bring a shapes aspect to it. You may even tell students that they have to select an object that is a certain shape or includes a certain shape. So those three categories, I would say: geometry, ratio and proportion, and especially measurement.
In America, 75% of adults don't have basic numeracy skills, but 50% of jobs require numeracy to do the job. And as I was talking about this, a business owner spoke up and said, yeah, for hired people for my factory, one of the questions we always ask is, how many quarters of an inch are in an inch? And he's like, yeah. And he said that 90% of people can't get it. And that's one of their weed out questions. And some math teachers say, well, Tinashe, I don't have time for project-based learning. I got too much to, quote, cover. What's your response to that?
It's not an either or proposition. So I do understand. I don't want to discount the fact that teachers are under a tremendous amount of pressure to use specific curricula. We've seen this movement of teacher-proofing curriculum, where I've even worked in a district where we had a instructional calendar where the expectation was that, for example, every Algebra 1 teacher should be on this page of the textbook and teaching this specific topic on this day. And so I understand that when you're in that predicament, you may not feel empowered to say, hey, we're going to go off script today. And so if you're in that situation, first of all, I would say that I understand and I feel for you. I wonder how you can maybe incorporate project-based learning, or we call it PBL, as an early finisher activity. Or if you could incorporate it as something that you just do a little bit every day. So the nice thing about a project is that this is not something that you're one and done, right? You could be working on the same project over the course of the semester, over the course of the year, right? But what I have seen is that when I've incorporated project-based learning in my instruction, it increases engagement, not just with the project itself, but overall. Because if I do a good job at aligning the math, so for example, let's say that I start a scale model project, right? At the same time that I'm starting a unit on converting between measurement units, right? I could structure that scale model project where it creates what we call a need to know, which is an important thing in project-based learning. You want to give students a need to know. But let's say that I say to my students that you have to measure things in metric units, right? And I only give them rulers that have inches. So now they have a need to know, well, if she wants this measurement in centimeters, then how do I go from inches to centimeters? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today, right? And so that idea that you can actually use the project as a way to get students more motivated to learn that standards-based content that you're required to teach.
You said a word early on. You said teacher proofing. Okay, are there curriculum people who actually say, I want to teacher proof this curriculum? Because that ticks me off. That makes me really angry. And it's so short-sighted, because the artistry of teaching is that we need great teachers to work with kids and to help them, especially in math. Have you heard that word, teacher proofing?
I've definitely heard that word, teacher proofing. We can't discount the reality on the ground. There's a shortage of teachers overall. There's even more shortage of math teachers. So it's not just about teacher proofing in the sense that we don't trust teachers, but what happens when we have to hire somebody who doesn't have a teaching background? And you just got to pull somebody off the street so that we can have a body in the classroom. And so I think that's what is this movement of, well, let's create resources and curricula that we can just put in a teacher's hands. That's one thing. Another side of this is, I know I've had conversations with teachers around the country who say to me, well, if I do project-based learning, like, I got to make all that up. Teachers want to have resources that are ready to go.
Yeah.
Practice. And so if I have to make up the curriculum as I go along, it's not necessarily what I signed up for either. That's the other thing, is we got to make sure that the resources that teachers have access to are actually not just aligned to the standards, but also aligned to best practices and research in math education. We know that there are a lot of textbook publishers and companies out there that have been putting out the same curriculum for decades, but it's not truly being updated to reflect, what we're learning about how students learn mathematics.
I remember my first teaching job, Tinashe, I was subbing for a friend, and she was going to be out for 6 weeks because she had her youngest son. And I was a sub for calculus. And while I'd had all that at Georgia Tech, it had been 4 or 5 years, and I was rusty beyond all get out. So it's great to provide very supportive content for teachers who lack the knowledge and experience. So as we're finishing up, Tinashe, what is your pep talk to teachers in the classroom?
I encourage teachers to be courageous and do what's in the best interest of students. Because a lot of times, especially when you are a young teacher and you're new to the classroom, there's a level of trepidation, like, oh, this stuff that you're talking about sounds really fun and cool. But what about when the principal walks into my classroom and sees me going rogue or sees me doing something that is not what was prescribed? And I just want teachers to understand that your number one job is to meet your students where they are. That's always going to look different depending on the classroom that you're in. And so be courageous enough to do what's in the best interest of your students, okay? And don't be afraid to do something creative or do something that's off the beat path if you know that it's going to benefit your students. And where do they need that more than in math?
I appreciate your time, Tinashe Blanchet. Thanks, Tinashe, for coming on the show yet again and for all you do for math educators.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. Watch the video version of this podcast and catch my new radio and TV show, Cool Cat Teacher Talk, on YouTube and a radio or TV station near you. Join my Cool Cat Teacher Classroom Matters newsletter at coolcatteacher.com/newsletter. Leave a review if you found this helpful. See you later, educator.